Okay, let's get started. Welcome to our Alumni AMA today. I'm your host from Flatiron School, Lindsay Williams, and joining me today is 2020 grad Joe Avila, software engineer at Avail, an Allstate company, here to talk about his journey to Flatiron School and what he's up to now. Joe,
Yeah,
thanks for letting us chat with you today.
absolutely.
Before we dive into what you were doing before Flatiron School, tell us which program you graduated from and what you're up to now.
Yeah, I signed up for the full stack software engineer program back in 2019, and I started January 27th, I think, 2020, which was right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I did do I signed up for a full in-person cohort, and I ended up doing the last month remote, and that was definitely an interesting experience. And then yeah, now I work at Avail. I've been there for 2.5 years. It'll be 3 years in September. So kind of approaching that timeline. I've I'm completely full stack here. I've been in the front end, I've been in the back end. I kind of live between both worlds, but I've definitely been eager to learn more about back end services.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, I know we want to dive into more about what you're up to at Avail, but before we get into those details, let's go into the Wayback Machine. Tell us what you were doing before Flatiron School. So you haven't, it's not a twinkle in your eye yet. What were you up to before Flatiron?
Yeah, a series of events led me to considering a boot camp. So I took a pretty non-traditional path. Started right out of high school. I was working full time as a waiter. Even during high school, I was like in that industry of service, restaurants and barista jobs, coffee shops, that sort of thing. Yeah, and so I did a 6 month DBA certificate, so database analyst certificate at a local community college here in Washington. Learning things like SQL, a little bit of JavaScript, HTML. I grew up with a computer, and I grew up like making layouts for websites like MySpace and Tumblr. So I had always been kind of in the realm of internet and software engineering, or I don't know, making websites, I guess is the right word, because back then it was really simple. Yeah, so I'd always been interested in it. I did the DBA certificate, and while I was doing that 6 month program, I actually got a promotion at my restaurant job. I ended up becoming a manager. And so I did nothing. I didn't do anything with my certificate. I got it, and then I was just working full time and pursuing that. After doing that for a while, I just decided, well, I after doing the management specifically for a year or two, I didn't like managing like I like it like I liked waiting tables. And so I just decided that was kind of not the career for me anymore, because if you want to make money in the restaurant industry, you do have to manage. But that's not really the fun part. So yeah, I left that career and kind of just did a bunch of random odd jobs. I was doing contracting as a contractor. Like I was installing tile in people's houses. I was doing landscaping. I eventually got into a warehouse job, delivering fine foods from Italy to restaurants, like imported wines and meats and cheeses. And while I was doing that, I was like, this isn't going to last very long. So I got to figure out what's next. And I have a friend who graduated, well, a friend of a friend graduated from Flatiron. And so they recommended it. It made sense to me. It was kind of moving back to something that I studied after high school. Um, yeah.
Nice. Nice. So hospitality meets sort of analytics. So what was it about the analytics? You know, you pursued this database analyst certificate, you've been, interested in the website building. What would you say really sort of catapulted you into that space and really took the leap into Flatiron School?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, like I was doing in middle school and high school, I was doing like the layouts for those websites. And I just really liked seeing the change I could have on a website, like making it look cool. Um, and then the DBA certificate, I kind of just did because I felt like I had to do something, right? Like I was fresh out of high school. I had to go to, I didn't have to, but like I decided to go to college. I'd been around computers my whole life. It just made sense. And it was a good opportunity. It was affordable. It was short term. I figured I would be able to get a job right out of it, like working for, obviously I'm in Washington, so like Microsoft is here.
Mhm.
At the time, companies like Amazon weren't here yet, at least not as big as they were. But there was still some big names around, and so I just assumed that it was going to be like a solid career track for me. Um, I wasn't quite ready for it yet. I didn't want to work in a professional environment like that. Working as a waiter and then a manager of a restaurant, it afforded me a little bit of a different lifestyle. And I think that just fit for me at the time. But when I was in the DBA program, the 6 month thing, like I really liked working with SQL. That was a language they taught us for querying databases, and like I don't know, like just that way of thinking just clicks with my mind, like logical. I don't like it just made sense, and
Yeah.
so once I was in that warehouse job again a couple of years later, and I was thinking, what do I want to do long term? That kind of came back to me, was like how easy, maybe not easy, but like how intuitive working with programming languages was.
Mhm.
For me. I like it, and
Cool.
so here I am.
Cool. So you decided to enroll in Flatiron School. You had a friend of a friend who went through it. Was it a pretty sort of easy decision for you to make, or did you still have
Oh.
questions in your mind, like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions, and I was a very cautious and hesitant person in general. And so, like, I was like, I have to stop working for X amount of time. Like, that just doesn't. I've always made money, right? Like, I've always had to support myself.
Yeah.
I've always needed income. So I was like,
Right.
if I'm going to do that, I need to make sure that one, I'm going to get a job. Two, that like I'm going to have enough money to survive through that, and make sure that like I'm going to have a little bit of a landing pad after I graduate, because I know that I won't get a job the next day.
Mhm.
Um, and three, that like I'm gonna like it, or that I'm gonna enjoy the process. And so that's why I decided to do the in-person program for me. I know that like I'm not great with homework. I'm not great with sort of after work activities.
Mhm.
So I treated Flatiron like a job. Right. Like I was there 9 to 5 every day.
Mhm.
Obviously I wasn't making money from that, but like it was just very like job like. And unfortunately, there was more than enough coursework to keep me occupied, where like I was there and I was on. And if I wasn't, then like I fell behind. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Sorry, I kind
Yeah,
of
no, that's good. That was good.
yeah.
So you're in it, you're doing the program. What was maybe something that was a surprise to you, or an unexpected part of it?
Um, gosh, I mean, an unexpected part for me was the people that I was surrounded by. Having a cohort of people that I was working with was really great. And I'm actually still friends with at least 5 of my cohort. I think there was 19 when we first started. And then we eventually, as the modules went on, we did lose 1 or 2 here and there. But yeah, I have a really solid group of friends in a network that I am still really close to. I see them at least once a week, if not maybe a little bit less than that, but I still see them very often.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that was a really big part for me. Just one, like having people that were new to the software development industry, like new to the tech world. And then two, just like making friends. It's always fun, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
always good. That's great. What was maybe the hardest part for you?
Just keeping up, dude. Like it's drinking water from a fire hose. And I mean the hardest part absolutely was the pandemic. That major shift in the way we lived. And the way like Flatiron had to adjust, I had to adjust. Again, like I've never really been good at homework. And so all of a sudden having to work from home full time, and like do this stuff alone. Granted, we had remote and we had all this stuff, but we were still figuring it out as we went.
Mhm.
Um, that just really doesn't work for me as well. Like I will say I'm remote at my job now, and it's still a struggle sometimes to find the motivation, to
Mhm.
ask the right questions, to feel comfortable tapping people on the shoulder. Um, yeah, we shifted to remote in the middle of module 3 or 4, I forget. But it was kind of where you tied React with your Rails experience, and I actually ended up I think I would have failed my module 4 and had to repeat it. I was given some grace and leeway. They obviously understood that I understood the content, but like I was really struggling with the delivering of the project, and it just happened to be that switching to a remote was really challenging. And so I was able to move forward with my cohort, and I demonstrated that I knew the material but just like delivering that project. At the same time, we were like not allowed to come into the office or the building, and like had to be on Zoom. It was challenging, and I'm really grateful that let me move forward with my cohort.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big challenge for a lot of us. I was managing a campus at the time when we were moving to remote, and it was intimidating. But like anything, you know, you've got to be adaptive. And now that you're working remotely, I like to think that learning remotely set people up for success working remotely and managing a lot of those communication tools like
For
Slack
sure.
and Zoom and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that like it's every place is different. Like I've worked two jobs since leaving Flatiron, and both have had very different cultures for remote work.
Mhm.
And so just because it doesn't work one way doesn't mean that it won't work at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you're up to now. Tell us, what is Avail and what are you doing there?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question at the moment because we are changing our business model. So Avail, when I joined Avail, we were a peer-to-peer car sharing company, think Airbnb, but for your car.
Hmm.
And we were modeled in a way where you would park your car at an airport. So like we had locations in Denver, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, Texas, places like that. And, you know, if you were leaving town for a week or a month, or if you just had like your extra vehicle, you could park your car at the airport and people would rent it when they come into town. You'd get paid by the day for them using it. You get free parking at the airport, etc. So about a year and a half ago, we switched to a fully LTE location. So light touch experience is what we call it, or downtown. So instead of leaving your car at an airport, you leave your car at a parking lot. We partnered with Laz, who, if you're not familiar with Laz parking, they're like all over the
Oh, yeah.
country. You,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you probably don't know
Mhm.
their name, but like if you've been in
I
a
know what you're
parking
talking
lot,
about.
it's probably Laz.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and so we did like a model where like you would park your car downtown, and then similar people would borrow it as needed. Um, and now we still offer that downtown LTE experience, but we're actually looking more towards like a business to business solution, offering our website and our software as SaaS, so software as a service. So where like we're working with car dealerships and car manufacturing companies to facilitate test drives. So like if you wanted to buy a car, you could schedule a test drive on our website, and it would be like a longer term thing. So like let's say you want to take a car home for a week, you could schedule that, and you know you would use our service to do that. It's not we're not actually there yet. We're not offering that, but we're working on that. And so right now, we're doing a lot of research, and I'm getting a lot of architectural experience. So literally diagramming like possible flows for our services.
Mhm.
If I could just like share an example of something that
Yeah.
I got to work on before, because
Sure.
it ties into what we're doing now. So one of my biggest projects at Avail was I automated entry and exit for parking lots using a QR code. So that was something we had never done before. We always had staff at airports, and so you would talk to a person to get in. But when we moved to the downtown model, we had to find out ways to. We're not going to have staff there all the time, and neither will Laz necessarily.
Mhm.
So we needed a way to create QR codes when a borrower or a user wanted to get a car, for them to get into the garage securely and get out securely. And so I got to work on the project where we made that system fully automatic. And so the reason I brought that up is because we're now doing something similar. Because you're borrowing from a car lot, you'll be talking to somebody, but it's not necessarily our employee, and so we won't have access to that. And so we're just kind of lost track of where I was going with that. But
Yeah, that's okay.
so we're doing a lot of research and a lot of
Yeah.
architecture, doing diagramming. We're not actually working on many like bugs or delivering a new
Uh-huh.
feature at the moment. It's a lot of thinking, which is a really cool space to be in. But again, I'm not great at homework, so really hard for me.
It sounds like a
Yeah.
really cool project. I know you were
Yeah.
talking maybe going there from how you were playing more of like an architecture type of role currently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like that for someone with 3 years of software engineering experience, I would say that I'm very, very lucky to be positioned where I am, because I'm not a junior developer necessarily, but you know, at a larger company, I might not be able to work on project like this. I would be sort of doing grunt work, for lack of a better word, maybe. There's not a lot of red tape at a company like Avail. We get to do, if you have an idea, you get to propose it, and you'll be heard by like, I speak with my principal engineer on a weekly, if not daily basis. He gives me direct feedback. And I think that's pretty rare to like work with someone with that much experience.
Sure.
At the level that I'm currently at. Yeah, so I definitely, it's an interesting position to be in. It's very challenging, but some really cool outcomes as well.
Nice. Tell us about getting into your first job, and then how did you get into Avail?
Yeah, so my first, that's actually, I got into these two jobs by the same person. So I've always been a very inquisitive person, and I'm not very shy. I'm pretty assertive when it comes to like having questions and asking them. So prior to joining Flatiron, I was reaching out to a bunch of alumni and being like, hey, what was your experience? What was the hardest part, et cetera, et cetera. So using LinkedIn to do that, just like ask a bunch of questions to people. And before I graduated Flatiron, I knew a friend who had done a UX UI design program bootcamp. It wasn't Flatiron, but I knew she was employed, and I knew she had done something similar. And so I reached out to her and asked her, like, hey, what was your experience like? How did you get your first job? And she was kind enough to introduce me to her boss, who would then become my boss. He was a software engineer, took a more traditional route, like had gone the 4-year degree, but just was like very interested. Like his mindset was like, it doesn't matter if you have a degree or if you're not, like, we'll train you to do what you need to do. And him and I just like clicked. We just, I think, meshed really well from the first time we met. So she introduced me to him. He like set up a 5-minute coffee chat. It ended up going on for some time. And he let me know, I was like, hey, I'm not hiring right now. Like, I can't give you a job at the moment, but like, if that opportunity ever arises, I would love to. And so 3 months later, maybe even 6 months later, because I was unemployed for quite some time after graduating Flatiron. I think it was mostly due to the pandemic. There was so much uncertainty and people weren't really hiring. But anyway, after a lot of time, he reached out to me. He's like, hey, I've got that opportunity if you're still available.
Wow.
And that was like a light at the end of the tunnel, because like I said, I had been unemployed for quite some time, doing the job tracker situation, working part-time as a barista again. Yeah.
That's good. I mean, hospitality kind of came to a grinding halt in some ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I got really lucky. I mean, Seattle, Starbucks, drive-through coffee.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I was making minimal money, and I was like, there was so many ups and downs of being unemployed. That I will say, like, that wasn't the hardest part of the program, because it didn't happen while I was in there, but post-program job searching and that period of time where you're not certain what's going to happen next, that was really challenging.
Yeah, super hard.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's like, forgive the sort of like sports analogy, but we kind of liken it to a triathlon. You prepare for the program, that's like one step. Then you are in the program, that's the second, marathon or whatever. And then you graduate, and the job search is like the last marathon that you have to run. And
yeah, and I think it's a really good analogy. You have to pace yourself. You have to maintain that pace, and like recognize that you're going to mentally want to give up at some points, but like you're just kind of treading along. You don't know if you've got another 6 miles or another 1 step, but like you're just kind of going. Yeah. So anyway, he got me the job. I worked as a contractor for Boeing for 6 months. That was remote as well, with a little bit of an in-person aspect. And then he left the company that we were both at. His name was Dan. He left the company about 2 months after I got in. And I was there for I had a 6-month contract. So I finished that out. And then at the end of that 6-month contract, I kept in touch with him. And the company he had went to wasn't hiring at the time, but again, he reached out to me after a certain amount of time, and was able to offer me a role with Avail, which of course I had to apply. And I had to go through that process. I wasn't just handed the job, but yeah. So looking to my personal network of people, and not being afraid to ask questions or ask for advice, I think landed me both my roles. And also just being like, I'm not great with technical interviews. I've studied for them, and they're challenging, but like, I think being open and talkative, and friendly, is really helpful. If you're going to be leveraging like personal network for jobs. And anytime you get FaceTime with like an interviewer, whether it's a recruiter, someone who might be your manager, or like another software developer, like just making that the most of that time has been my strategy. Has served me well.
Yeah. I mean, I can't help but think about your hospitality background. How do you
For
feel
sure.
like that served you and where you are and where you've gotten?
Yeah, 100%. It definitely has served me well. And I mean, I've always told people like if I could make a living off of waiting tables, I probably would. But like, I'm not getting that software developer salary
Yeah.
by being waiter.
Hmm.
Uh, but I love that sort of work. I love talking to people.
Yeah.
Um, I enjoy human to human interaction. And I think like I don't know. I've told myself this from when I started Flatiron. Like I don't know if I will be a software developer forever, but the cost of it versus like the possible income of it, like it pays for itself. It's already paid for itself, I think, in the 3 years since I've graduated, or 4 years since I've graduated.
Hmm.
And so down the line, it's opened doors for me. And so like I've considered like how do I merge? I have the technical understanding and I enjoy the technical side of it, but I also enjoy talking to people. And so how do I merge like maybe there's a role for me in business products where like I am a go between like stakeholders, whether it's a CEO or like a possible business partner and the software developer, right? Like I can take technical standards and I can communicate them to somebody who doesn't quite understand or doesn't care to understand.
Yeah.
Um,
Sounds like a product owner or product manager type.
yeah, yeah. So while I'm a software developer now, I don't know that I will be in the future, but I think just thinking about the skill sets that I have and what I enjoy, kind of opens doors for me down the line.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah.
Great. I just checked the time. It's flying. So let me just make sure we can get some
Oh,
questions
yeah.
asked from folks. Please feel free to drop any questions you have for Joe in the chat while you all are doing that. Oh, we got a couple here in Q&A. Okay, from Chris. Can you please share if the full stack engineering program will provide the skills to develop, deploy, and fix bugs for web and mobile applications?
Yeah. So I think that's a really big question, and those are three really different things. So as far as deployment goes, I don't think you really need to worry about that in terms of your first role. Unless you're like a contract, like freelance contractor, unless you're creating a project from scratch, you're probably not going to be a part of the deployment process. My company has a whole team that handles that. We are mindful of like what it takes to deploy a project to specifically AWS because that's what we use. But yeah, deployment is something that's sort of out of my hands. I think it's good to understand that. And like I've done personal projects that have used like Gatsby and Netlify to deploy like my own portfolio. I'm working on a website for like a volleyball league in Seattle that I'm a part of. And so yeah, like Flatiron kind of set me up to understand not Flatiron didn't teach me how to deploy to Netlify using Gatsby, right? Like that's not a part of the process. I did deploy my capstone project to AWS, and I was given ample time to do that. I leveraged the coaches that I had, but like what Flatiron did was teach me how to learn. And I think if you're already a part of the program, you've probably encountered that, right? Like Googling and Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow, like learning to solve those problems yourself is what I got from Flatiron, like learning to filter through the noise of the internet and like find the solution that's going to work for you. Because obviously, like there's always you can copy and paste code, but it's usually not that doesn't work. That doesn't solve your specific problem, and so it's kind of like reading through documentation. And learning how to apply it to your own thing. Yeah, Flatiron definitely gave me that. So that's just the deployment spot. The develop, absolutely. I think I left Flatiron hireable. The hardest part is just getting your foot in the door, right, to demonstrate your skills. But I think when I left Flatiron, I had the skills needed to work, and I demonstrated that 2 times because I got hired twice. And the reality is like you leave Flatiron with a base level of knowledge that's like very moldable, and that's what companies want. They don't need you to know how to fix everything. They need to be able to teach you to do what they need you to do. And so just kind of keeping that in mind that like you're not going to know the problems, you're not going to know the answer to every problem. And that they don't expect you to with the level of experience you're leaving Flatiron with. You just need to be able to be teachable, ask questions, and like be open-minded, and also just share like, hey, I don't know, do you know, and can you help me with that? Like that's a very real part of the interviewing process is like don't pretend to know something you don't. I think that shows that like maybe you're egotistical or you're not willing to be vulnerable, and employers are looking for that. Like they want to know that if you're struggling with something, that you're going to bring it up immediately, because they don't want you sitting on a ticket for 6 months. They want to know that like, hey, I have this problem, and like, let's get it fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and fixing bugs, absolutely. Like that's,
Reading
I think,
and
the
all that.
easiest part of it. Like you're ready to go if you're leaving the program with graduate. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right, we got one more question from Aaron. Looking back on your first job out of Flatiron, how did your day-to-day tasks resemble the things you were doing in the program? How prepared did you feel jumping into the role versus learning on the job?
Um, yeah, the I would say like it doesn't necessarily resemble it too much. Again, just because I was working on so both jobs that I've had, I've been brought into projects that are existing. So I'm not creating something from scratch, which is something that we did at Flatiron. I'm integrating into a system that already exists. And so they look a little different, but yeah, I guess the major difference between what I was doing at Flatiron versus what I've been doing at my job is that I spend a lot of time reading other people's code and like trying to decipher that. And that is a huge skill that you're going to need. And so I think something that people do to kind of tackle that preemptively is to get into open source programs, making PRs on large code bases, or even just like trying to create a program again. So like, for example, if you've used React, can you create React? Or if not, like if you've used React, or if you've used React and encountered a bug, can you go and fix that bug for them? React is just an example. They're huge and they have so many contributors, probably not the best place to start, but just that mindset of like, you need to be able to read code. And knowing that is going to be helpful, I think.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, that's all we have time for, everybody. Joe, thank you so much for joining us for this power half hour, as we like to call it.
Yeah.
It was really fun to hear about your journey and your experiences. And thank you everyone for joining. And if you are thinking about applying to Flatiron School, we'd love to see your application come through just to start a conversation. If you're already with us, fantastic. We look forward to seeing you on the interwebs. Everyone have a great afternoon.
And I will say, anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Joseph Avila. And if you have any more questions, I'm happy to continue that conversation. So
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.